Hello and welcome to Master Edison Format. This is a channel for you if you want to get better at Edison, improve your game, and win more games in Edison Format. Today is episode 5 of the Get Better at Edison series, and I want to talk about what kind of spell cards we play in Edison, how to play around them, kind of give you an idea of what are the most common spells or spell cards you're going to face, and how kind of you can mitigate the advantage they give your opponent, how you can kind of predict them and kind of play around these cards. Now, starting off with kind of the most common cards by far are Heavy Storm. This is played in every deck pretty much, and this is one of the, they say, the big three, the trinity of Heavy Storm, Dark Core, and Monster Reborn. Luckily for Edison player, Dark Core and Reborn are banned in Edison, so you only have to really think about Heavy Storm. And this card, it's a one-off. When I talk about playing around, like, generally speaking, you don't want to think too much about playing around cards that are one-offs, but this is what the best players do. So how do you play around this? Really, the only way is, one, you are lucky and you have Starlight Road, but you're not going to have Starlight Road at the same time as your opponent having Heavy Storm all the time. So the best way to play around this is to just not set your whole hand, set only the back rows you think you're going to use in that turn, and not set too many cards, not set bluffs. Like, even bluffing, like, good players are going to see through bluffs, and usually you're going to get punished for putting cards that you can't chain, because they're going to get hit by Heavy Storm, they're going to be hit by MSTs, or hitting by Judgment Dragons, Dark Arm Dragons, Caiuses. Like, you're just leaving on the field random things that are going to get hit by all kinds of effects which otherwise wouldn't have gotten much value, even Icarus attacks, like Dust Tornado. So generally speaking, I recommend not setting too many bluffs, only if you're really desperate and like you don't really, your opponent has an MST and you have one back row that you really need, then makes sense. But if your opponent hasn't used Heavy Storm, you generally want to set 1 to maximum 2 cards. One good way to play around it is with cards like Legacy of Yatagarasu or in general chainable cards, which make this Heavy Storm be either an even trade or even a negative trade for your opponent. So that's my advice for Heavy Storm. When you have Heavy Storm yourself, the other thing is, when your opponent has Heavy Storm, the other kind of clue to look at is they're not setting much back row themselves, or sometimes they might set just one, and sometimes it might even be that might even be the Heavy Storm itself. So that's kind of a clue to, if for example you're playing against Gladiator Beast or against Blackwing and they only set one card, you kind of have to be worried that they're holding a Heavy Storm in hand, or they're planning to use it next turn. So you don't want to be in a false sense of security thinking, oh, they set one, so I can set my hand. Generally speaking, you have to, that's kind of a red flag to me that they're getting ready to wipe the spells and traps. And kind of just going over the similar type of card as Heavy Storm, Trunade. I mean, this card, like, there's really not much you can do. All you can do is like Sorin Judgment it, and then you hope you can stop your opponent's push, because this is played by cards like that, by decks like Dragon Turbo. Not really anything you can do here. I think the only thing is just have something you can chain to this and to stop it, which is in Edison is basically Dark Bribe or Sorin Judgment, but like I don't think you're chaining Dark Bribe to this, so Sorin Judgment is the only thing you can do. And so really there's no way to play around something like Trunade, and there's not really a way to play around something like Cold Wave. Yeah, the only thing you can do, I don't know, maybe when your opponent enters the main phase, try to make them use something else, so they have to chain some other cards so they can't use the Cold Wave. There's not really much else. Actually, no, you can't even do that because they have priority, so there's really nothing you can do to play around these Cold Wave and Trunade. You can, though, mitigate the effect of Heavy Storm. So that's kind of the first kind of thing about the big kind of spell and trap clearing cards. In terms of like the other really common card is Brain Control. This is played again by almost every deck. The only real way to mitigate what this does to you is to, number one, not leave anything on the field that's going to be very powerful for your opponents to use. For example, if you don't need to summon Dark Arm Dragon to this, like if you don't need to pop your opponent's board, or they don't have really anything for you to pop with Dark Arm, and you don't know, your opponent hasn't used Brain Control before, you have to really be careful about whether it's worth it to summon it or not. And oftentimes you have to kind of like think about it. And this is the same for something like Mark of the Rose. It's the same thing with this, but specifically for Brand decks, like Brain Control, Mark of the Rose. This is the same kind of type of card, and you really want to. The only way to kind of predict it. This often you can see because they search it. Brain Control you can't see, but you kind of have to guess. And I've lost so many games to Brain Control just because it's a one-off. I don't think about it, and then they just either they rip it or they have it and they just take my monster and then attack me full game. And that's kind of the most common way. I think you get outplayed by like a spell card. I think it's Brain Control just ruining your day. And so, for example, if you have a Dark Arm, you don't want it to get Brain Control. Either you found some way to bounce it back to your hand with a Brionac or something, or you kind of you don't summon it unless you necessarily need to. So that's one way to do it. Another way is to have something you can tribute the target with. For example, having a deck devastation virus, or having a Book of Moon to put it face down, or having something to kind of do in response to this Brain Control. That's kind of the only other way to stop this. Other thing is something like Book of Moon. How do you play around Book of Moon? Again, this is trainable to just about in any situation, so not so easy. One way is before you actually attack with anything, you kind of target it or destroy your opponent's back row with some effect, and that way they have to use it on something, and then you can flip the opponent back to face up attack. But again, this is like not even, doesn't even hurt you a ton, except in certain situations. For example, like in GBs, this is very good. In some decks, this is quite good, but you kind of have to, not really much you can do against that. Future Fusion, the only thing to do against this is to have something that's going to respond to it, like a Mystical Space Typhoon, something like Mark of the Rose we already talked about. Mind Control. Again, this usually comes in the side deck. Like if you're playing a value Turbo Mirror, don't leave a Dark Refer on the field for them to steer. But again, these are kind of one-offs, generally speaking, except for the Book of Moon. So you don't really, you're not really kind of thinking about it too much. Like the Mark of the Rose, you think about it in the Brand matchup. Miracle Fusion, the only thing you can do is try to make sure you banish their targets from the grave. Use your DD Crow when in chain to this, so hopefully they don't have any other targets to use with it. Try to keep the graveyard clear. My Brother the Shield, this is again, it's usually coming in the side, or it's not really played in the main by many decks, but this is something you have to think about. Before targeting a monster, maybe with your Icarus, target their back row and see if and avoid targeting the monster so they can't train this to that. And MST, this very difficult, really no way to really play around this, but what you can do is try to bait it out, try to set just one card and one card that is chainable, like a Legacy Viata or Jar of Greed or something like that, and you'll see that your opponent, many opponents, especially kind of lower ranked opponent, are gonna just blind MST you all the time. And sometimes it's correct, sometimes you're trying to make a push and so you're not taking chances and you use your MST, but a lot of the time this is not correct. Blind MST is a mistake because you can use that MST for a much better target, like a Black Whirlwind or a Future Fusion. And you're gonna end up hitting a back row that either doesn't matter, or in the worst case is even chainable. So basically it was there just for this purpose of baiting you into attacking it, into using it. Then Pot of Avarice, the best card against this is something like a DD Crow or something like a Soul Release when they're kind of chain into the targets. The other cards like Scapegoat, this is not really played enough, I think, for somebody to think about. What you can do is, if you're expecting this, summon monsters like Bora, or monsters that can do piercing damage, or Archfiend Dragon that's going to destroy all the tokens, and then Soul Exchange. Again, this is played a lot in Monarch decks, in Frog decks. All this means is try to play something that can't get targeted, like try to make the Psychic Synchro, a Weight Synchro, that can negate the card that targets, because otherwise it's just gonna basically let them tribute. But cards like these are very difficult to actually make a play that avoids this. From the side, you have kind of few kind of common spells. You have noblemen. What this means is that you should tend to side out a lot of your set monsters. Like when I play value and I see my opponent game 2 sided in noblemen, in game 3 I'm siding out I think at least the hamsters, maybe even a couple of the Raikos if I don't really need them, and that just makes this card basically useless in that situation. And if you can make one of your opponent's cards useless, that you've already achieved a lot, like from a side decking perspective or a deck building perspective. So there is not really any way you can like avoid this. What you can do, for example, you can do some more specific things, like if you're the frog player, never leave both 3-burn frogs in the grave at the same time. Try to always bounce one to hand with the swap, or just always keep one kind of in your hand, so that if they do soul release you, they're not going to hit both 3-burns. And that kind of idea also with like value. But again, this can be used in any situation, so it's kind of like not really even worth, I think, considering too much. Like you do have to think about it, and you, for example, if you have a value or a pot of grabberies in a game 2 or 3, you might want to get more aggressive about using them before your opponent has a chance to soul release you. And then the lightning vortex, this is similar to a type of effect like Dark Core. If you overcommit to the board and you don't finish the game, you have to be ready for the possibility that your opponent's going to vortex you. But frankly, you have to be ready for the possibility your opponent's going to Kaios you, or you're going to have many outs to your board. So generally speaking, every time you make a push, you either finish the game, or if you don't finish the game, you have to predict that your opponent's going to have some way to turn it around, and then you still have a follow-up play after that. And that's kind of the question you have to answer. Okay, so when I talk about playing around spells and kind of understanding when to play around certain spells, I'm going to use this replay. This is from my game against Jesu Christia from a couple weeks ago, I think. I'm playing Value Turbo, he's playing Amaryllis Plant. Here I get information with the dash shoot, but in general you should always know when you're playing against Plants, they have Mark of the Rose, they have Heavy Storm. I mean, every deck has Heavy Storm, but they have especially Mark of the Rose, which is kind of like brain control, but you can play 3 copies of it. So here already he sets up this play with the Mark of the Rose, and he could already steal my Raiko if he wanted to. He doesn't do that. We search for another Raiko. Here I decide to hit his monster because he already see an end in the grave. I think it's like the monster that if it gets destroyed by battle, so I try to get rid of that. We go for Armageddon Knight. Here I go for the Dark Arm Dragon. I know about the Mark of the Rose, so here is where it gets kind of tricky. Here I for sure make wait a second, I don't make a mistake actually. Here is where I actually think about the Mark of the Rose, because of course I know about it, but I would have made a similar play even if I didn't explicitly know about it. If I know I'm playing this deck and I know for sure he's playing this card and like he hasn't done much else here in the game, I really think about it. And so here, this is why I make this weird play with Brionac to bounce my own Dark Arm, because I really don't want him to Mark of the Rose it, steal it, and then attack over my Brionac. So that's kind of why I do this whole thing. I still have 3 darks in the grave because I discarded a dark for Brionac. So I made this weird play exactly to kind of play around that, which in this case I do know about, but in other situation, even if you don't know about it, it's a reason to do it. Here again we have a Dark Arm, we do the same thing, we attack. Here there's a couple of things I could do. I decide to hit these things, and then since he has a dark in the grave, I decide to actually destroy my own Dark Arm Dragon with his own effect. And the reason for this is a bit counterintuitive. I don't want him to Mark of the Rose, Ghost, pop the back, or attack over the Brionac, then I'm stuck with nothing, and he has a Dark Arm Dragon every turn. Might have been a mistake, it's hard to really say. Here he goes for Amaryllis. He basically comes back. I would argue that here, if all of what I said happened, I still would have had a Dark Arm Dragon to carry him the next turn. So it is kind of damn if you do, damn if you don't kind of situation. Here we have the Raiko, we decide to only mirror, we set the Sirocco, but yeah, here we lose the game anyway. But just kind of an example of like what I talked about. And yeah, he has everything anyway, so doesn't really matter too much there. But again, this is kind of a common thing you're gonna see in a lot of situations. Here again, I know about the Nobleman now. So now that I know that he plays Nobleman in his basically in his Exa deck, he Okay, so yeah, he adds Marco Rose again, but now, so in his side deck, I know he plays Nobleman. Now I know about like not siding my monsters, or if anything, I know about not, you know, siding them out for game 3 if we get to a game 3. So here again, I don't give him a great target for this. I decide to sacrifice Brackos because I don't want to take 2000 every turn because of his Marco Rose. I go for this. He has the Crow. He has a Nobleman set which doesn't do anything. Gets to do his trade-in. He has Rome Fire. Here we Heavy Storm, and then goes for Armageddon Knight, go for Dark Arm, and that's just game. But you see again, like this is a pattern that you see kind of. This is what I talk about when I talk about playing around things. So here he sets a Misty. I know, you know, this deck plays a lot of spells, a lot of things that equip spells and like continue spells, and so that's something to always keep in mind. Here I decide to go to basically just attack with this, play Conservative. He hits my own MST, which I would never brand MST there, because I'd rather hit the DDR or Miracle Fertilizer or any of those. So here we have, we also set up the Grave with a value. He adds this Mark of the Rose again, and we don't really give him a great target for it. Here, I mean, he was dead anyway. He just had a Dust Tornado, but even if I wouldn't be able to kill him that turn, like I know about this the whole game, and so this is kind of what I mean when I talk about playing around things. You know, the most common thing you're gonna play around is Heavy Storm, because you don't want to set too much. You only want to set what you're gonna use for that turn. The cards you keep in your hand are safer, generally speaking. And the second thing is playing around cards like Brain Control. It's very difficult to play around Brain Control because, you know, it's at 1 and you don't, you know, you don't know if they have it, and if they have it, like most of the time it's gonna turn the game around anyway. But if you do know about something like that, or Mark of the Rose, you don't summon your Dark Arm, or you bounce your Dark Arm to hand, you don't leave it there on the field for somebody to take control, and that's kind of what I mean when I talk about playing around spell cards in Edison format. I hope you guys enjoy this video. Here we also have some nice, I'm pretty sure he's Italian too, we have some nice commentary from my opponent, but you know, that doesn't really matter. Yeah, if you want to get better at Edison, learn kind of some tips, tricks, like improve your game, master Edison format, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.